I love and dread being scared in almost equal measure. The thrill of the unknown, the slow build of tension, the sudden release, it's all unnervingly fun for me, especially when I get to do so in games. World of Horror has played unlike any horror game I've experienced before in the best way possible. In fact, it plays unlike most games I've ever played before. Through many disparate pieces that set it apart, it shines like a beautiful star in the sky of games, a beacon for a hungry, wandering old god and a curious gamer alike. At its core, World of Horror is an RPG, or a roguelike, depending on your definition of the genre, where players control one of several young adults in Shiokawa, Fukushima during pre-cellular 1980X. An old god is bearing down on the world, and it's up to you to thwart them by investigating and resolving various mysteries and horrors across the city. Using an older RPG-style interface of investigation and combat, players will try to save the only world they know, and hopefully live to the end of their journey. World of Horror wastes no time introducing players to its odd but meticulously organized interface. The entire game is displayed on a 1980s-era computer, the computer set up in a dark room, a single window framing a night-shadowed town outside. The entirety of World of Horror is played on that computer and its two-color screen, and you need only a mouse to experience it. There is no game-based skill of timing or coordination needed, only menus, dialogue, and descriptions to click through, all backdropped by MS Paint-created 2-bit illustrations. For an unfamiliar player, the interface and its loads of options between travel, exploration, and combat can be daunting. But World of Horror, despite being a mechanically and thematically dense and heavy experience, takes its time, gently bringing players into the fold, making sure they have a grasp on things as it loosens its leash around players. You'll be fighting off abominable horrors and eyeball worms in no time. I was initially nervous about the difficulty when I started off. World of Horror just had an air of tough game. But World of Horror is about repeated, multiple, and varied playthroughs, and it widens its net appropriately with its difficulty. While not required, it recommends players start with a tutorial level, spine-chilling story of school scissors. And yes, the alliteration is a recurring theme. It's a simpler mystery that exposes players to the bare mechanics of the game and gives them a taste of what lies in wait for them. True to form, this tutorial can still mess players up. This is World of Horror, after all. If players fail or lose, they'll find themselves cut to ribbons by the end of it. But it's all a learning process that builds on and reinforces what players have tried. Even after that, a simpler version of the game's full capacity, extracurricular activities, streamlines some of the more random elements to provide a consistent starting point. Players will always start with the same character and backstory on a low difficulty. Get used to that, and once you're comfortable, start playing around with the knobs and dials to find your preferred descent into madness. Regarding difficulty, the slider ranges from 0 for those more interested in the writing, the art, and the thematic horror than they are the gameplay, up to 4, the ultimate mechanical challenge for those seeking horror in both gameplay and narrative. I tend towards the middle to lower end of the spectrum, but still find plenty of challenge and enjoyment to be had. The difficulty spectrum helps to accommodate the different kinds of gamers, whether by preference or skill, that may attempt to rout the old gods. World of Horror stands on its own in my eyes, even against AAA juggernauts with its art style. It can be played in 1-bit or 2-bit mode, limiting the colors available to only a few, again in line with the interface. This doesn't limit the experience by any means. The monsters, the situations, the eldritch and body horrors are all conveyed sharply and horrifyingly. That so much can be conveyed and done with so few colors is a thing of beauty and mastery. Anything crawling throughout World of Horror, be it a situation or an enemy, simply wouldn't work in a high-resolution game. Horror, at least in my eye, is at its best when it forces its audience, be it reader, viewer, or player, to fill in the gaps with their own experiences, fears, and perspectives. It makes the horror ours. The 1 and 2-bit art style still shows us what to be afraid of, make no mistake. But what it does with that art is give us a mostly static image to start seeing elsewhere in our lives, in the shadows, in the corner of our eye, more than a 3D rendered model might be able to. We fill in the blanks, and World of Horror transcends past the game as such. One must give proper credence to the game's main inspiration, horror manga artist Junji Ito. Ito's twisted mastery of body horror is on full display in the different enemies and situations that players encounter, and are what have made my skin crawl and my spine jolt in both dread and horror throughout my play. The pantheon of old gods is a dreadful, ominous presence, drawing from both Ito's creations and otherwise. I'll be the first to admit that I didn't know who Junji Ito was or much about his style before playing, but I am glad to have looked into it since. The music and sound design, composed by Sebastian Zybowski and Joseph Bailey, is perfection, despite its chiptune soundtrack being more primitive than what most players in the 2020s are used to. It is sharp, jarring, unsettling, and thematic. The soundscape crashes, slices, and slashes with its limited tools, but manages to terrify as much as any scare in other games might. Conversely, World of Horror knows when to dial back and let players stew in the ambient silence. It plays into active terror and pervasive dread beautifully. World of Horror's experience is all stitched together by its writing, courtesy of writers Cassandra Kau and G.W. Musco. Rolling between short, punchy, and panicked moments to longer, dreadful set pieces, the writer's words both complement and are complemented by the art and soundscape throughout these many mysteries. All of these things make World of Horror fun, if not moderately terrifying, to play, but a successful run from beginning to end doesn't take long. Less than an hour is what I usually clock at. So why return? In a word, multiplicity. There are multiple difficulty levels for all range of players to challenge themselves with. There are multiple mysteries to solve, randomized every time you load up, and multiple endings to each mystery depending on your actions or inactions. There are multiple old gods that can influence the world, and multiple player characters that struggle against them. There are multiple in-game achievements that yield new items for future runs. At the base level, given the 14 playable characters, the 9 old gods threatening Shiokawa, and 21 potential mysteries to start your run as of version 1.0 alone, there are over 2,500 unique story beginnings to be told. And this doesn't even count the randomized encounters, both combat and narrative, and the stirrings of the old gods peppered throughout. World of Horror is a game of multiplicity, compressed into a distilled, one-bit, ever-changing compendium of horror. The last thing that stands out to me is that World of Horror excels no matter how one plays it. When I started, back when it was still in early access, I lapped in every word of prose. I let the unsettling chiptune soundtrack drag me in, and I found myself lost in the Ito-esque monstrosities that I encountered. I let it all wash over me and immerse me in the world. Now, as I've grown familiar with the story beats, even as new ones cross my path, I've built up habits and burned through certain phases and stages that I've already been through, whether to advance the game elsewhere or as a personal challenge. Someday I'll ramp up the difficulty and play the game as a mechanical challenge, but today is not that day. Tomorrow's not looking too good either. In all I know of World of Horror, and no matter how I play it, it excels. It can be just as much a slow burn of building dread as much as it can be a mechanically grueling gauntlet. As with so much else within it, it just depends on the individual player that approaches it. I love horror games. I love the stories that they tell. More than anything, I genuinely love when horror games make themselves accessible to a wider swath of players. There may not be a safe mode in World of Horror, but it is a game designed for a wide variety of people, for a wide variety of reasons, and it sacrifices none of the other aspects that make it great and terrifying along the way. This is a game that deserves to be played by as many people as possible, because it is designed for as many people as possible. So go on, download it, play it. I promise it's not a cult, but if it was, you could do worse.